Hello and welcome to Lesson 13 in Seow's A Grammar for Biblical Hebrew. Lesson 13 beginning on page 145. We meet in this virtual audio space at an important moment in our Hebrew experience. We are now going to get into the Hebrew verb. We've been talking about verbs here and there. I mentioned some verbs at various points. Seow's given us some verbs even as part of our vocab lists leading up to Lesson 13. But now we're actually going to start to use the most basic kind of verb, the most common type of verb, we might even say, what we will call the Kal perfect. Now, Seow's going to introduce this to us, just giving you a little preview, sort of in smallish bites or in parts. We're going to have Lesson 13, which is going to get us used to the idea of what is called the perfect type of noun. And then Lesson 14, he's going to introduce us to the Kal perfect again, but this time just of different kinds of verbs. Okay. And then in Lesson 15, he's going to introduce us to another kind of verb altogether, which is actually pretty similar to this kind. So it's going to be some daunting stuff coming ahead. Warning, rough waters ahead. But if you listen to this multiple times, if you read the lesson closely, don't procrastinate, don't fall behind. You can do this. Okay. Our first type of verb we want to get used to is what we will call the perfect. The perfect. In the third masculine singular, the perfect verb is just the three root letters of the verb. Let's take a verb like katav. Kaf, tav, bet means he wrote. Okay. Seow has been defining verbs as to write, but remember I had mentioned in a previous lesson's recording, I believe, that in fact verbs are not to be defined as to write. I mean, there's a way to say to write in Hebrew. It's lichtov, not katav, okay? Katav actually just means he wrote. Katav, okay? He's got some examples of these on page 145 in that paragraph under number 2. Katav, shamar, nafal, and yarad. Those are all third masculine singular Kal perfect verbs. And that's kind of like the lexical or dictionary form of the verb that you'd want to memorize for vocab memorization. How do these work? How are they translated? Well, I've already said. Katav, he wrote. Shamar, he kept, or even he keeps. We may want to restrict our definitions of these words to a true grammatical perfect. Perfect meaning action that is complete. In fact, in this lesson, Seow's going to give us a nice rundown of what the perfect is used for and what it looks like, and we're going to go over this in a second. But maybe we want to define katav simply as he wrote. Shamar, he kept, or he observed. Nafal, I'm still just reading these words from the paragraph on the bottom of page 145. Nafal, he fell. Yarad, he descended. Okay. Katav could even mean, some of these could mean, the subject here could be it, right? So nafal could mean it fell, the it being a masculine noun. Or yarad could mean it descended. It'd be hard to say it wrote or it kept. I don't know what kind of it would be writing, but, sometimes you get things like it fell or so on. On page 145, he gives us a chart. You might say, well, okay, what if I want to say she wrote? Or they wrote. They masculine plural wrote, or common plural, I guess, or second masculine plural, or first common plural. Well, there's a set of endings for that. Okay? And by the way, those set of endings, though they are a little different, maybe from some of the endings we've been learning, they do have some commonalities. So katav would be the third masculine singular. I'm just putting katav into that chart on page 145. Kateva would be the feminine singular. Katav ta, second masculine singular. Notice the ta ending, kind of like ata, the second masculine singular independent pronoun. Katavt, second feminine singular, and katavti, that e ending for the first person stuff. And then these other endings, the third common plural maybe is not quite the same with that u. Kathevu, okay. But katavtem, katavten, and katavnu should be more or less familiar to you, right? So we see we've had some helpers already leading up to this in learning the noun suffixes, okay? Page 146, he gives a big bad chart of what this looks like. Shamar, he uses shamar as the example of just a good old strong verb. Reading down the column there for shamar. Shamar, he kept. Shamara, she kept. Shamarta, you kept. Shamart, you kept. You woman kept. Shamarti, I kept. Shamehu, they kept. Shamartem, you all kept. Y'all masculine plural kept. Shamarten, y'all feminine plural kept. And shamarnu, we kept. See how that works? Yeah, he gives you some other verb types. Kaved, be heavy, and katon, be small. And then he shows you how those look. Same endings. Are the vowels a little bit different in the middle? Yeah, I mean, sometimes. But, actually, they're pretty similar. If you look down, it's just that the word kind of, the word has a different pattern. Instead of it's a, or o in the case of katon. So what you really want to know is, how is the perfect used? How does this baby work? Read that paragraph on page 147. We'll be talking about this more in class, if you're in class. Page 147.3. Biblical Hebrew does not have tenses in the strict sense, past tense or future tense. Rather, time of occurrence, tense, is indicated in context by certain adverbs and in later lessons by the whole way the sentence is set up. The finite verbs themselves do not indicate tense, but rather it is thought aspect. That is, whether the situation is being viewed by the speaker or writer as an outsider looking at a situation as a completed whole, a finished thing, that is the perfect, or as an insider looking at a situation as it develops, the imperfect, not completed action. For example, a narrator recounting a battle may depict the event from the perspective of an outsider who knows the entire situation from the beginning to end. If so, the narrator would ideally use verbs in the perfect. Brian marched out on the battlefield. It's something that's already been done, and I'm an outsider narrating. A participant in the battle, on the other hand, would probably use verbs in the imperfect, as would a narrator if that narrator attempts to describe the events if he or she were personally present. So I'm walking out onto the battlefield, and I'm and I see what's happened. Now we're talking about it a little bit differently. So it's going to take something it's going to take a little getting used to in Hebrew. For those of you who have studied Greek, perhaps you'll note that a system like this is a little bit different. It's not just clear what past tense is. Okay, it's the way the sentence is set up. But the perfect, its most basic use is to describe completed action from the situation of an outsider. Page 148 and 149, he gives some examples from the Bible. Let's review a couple of these just to get a feel for how this works, and you should be reading, of course, his explanations in between these examples. I'll just pick a couple. Page 148, how about Deuteronomy 4:10? Amadta lifnei Adonai. Amadta lifnei Adonai. You stood, amad is the root there, ta, second masculine singular, you stood before the Lord. Okay, it's like past tense, and we would render this with the simple English past tense. Shachach el, right below it, Psalm 10:11. Shachach el, God has forgotten. God forgot. Okay. You might even get a kind of English past perfect type of translation, as below with Genesis 21:1. Va'adonai pakad et Sarah ka'asher amar. Now, va or ve can sometimes be translated as now, not just and. Now, Yahweh visited pakad et Sarah, ka'asher amar, just as he said, or just as he had said. He did something previously in the past tense of the story, so we do he had said. Notice something here about the syntax, which is really interesting. Va'adonai pakad et Sarah. Now the Lord visited Sarah. In Hebrew, weirdly enough, oftentimes the verb comes after the subject. The verb comes after the subject, and the verb matches the subject in gender and number. So Yahweh would be third masculine singular, so pakad is You guessed it, third masculine singular. If we had a subject there, someone else visiting Seow, and it was, say, a plurality of people, say like Melachim, a bunch of kings, guess what? Pakad is going to have to be in the plural as Pakadu. Okay? Melachim Pakadu, kings appointed or visited. Okay? So that's the way this works. Things match each other. How about moving down a little bit? I mean, you get all kinds of things. Sometimes, like page 148C, sometimes you can render these best in the English present. Okay? Within a character's voice speaking in a narrative. So how about Exodus 25:1 there near the middle of the page? Exodus 25:1. Ahavti et Adoni. Ahavti et Adoni. I love, ahav is the root there. T is that first common singular suffix for the perfect. I love whom? My, at definite object marker, my master. I love my master. Okay. Take a look down at E, 2 Samuel 17:11. Ki ya'atzti. Ya'atz means advise. Ki ya'atzti. So I advise. So it's like an instant, something suggesting instantaneous occurrence, okay, can also be the perfect. Page 149, the perfect can even be, used almost like a participle. Page 149, at the top there, 1 Kings 15:19. Sholachti lecha shochad. I am sending you a gift. Some of this is going to depend then on the sentence you're reading and what's happening in that sentence. If a character is telling another character that he's sending him a gift at that time, and it's clear that that gift hasn't been sent yet, or it's in progress, or if it's a character writing in a letter, as in 1 Kings 15, kind of like if you were writing a letter to someone or an email, like, I'm sending you a card for your birthday, okay? It will be clear that, you're speaking that as you're doing it. So there might be some situations where we have to toy with this idea of just rendering the perfect as a past tense, okay? Page 149, 150, 151, he's just explaining syntax, explaining that, in fact, page 150 is the payoff here. He's explaining on page 150 that, in fact, the verb comes after the subject. Sometimes the subject is actually indicated in the verb itself, and sometimes it can be supplied by the sentence. So page 150, he gives some examples. 2 Chronicles 24:17 on page 150, number 5. Az Shema HaMelech Eleihem. Az Shema HaMelech Eleihem. Az means then, sort of setting up the time here. Then, Shema, he listened. Who listened? HaMelech. Then the king listened to them. How about Joshua 2:9 right below it? Natan Adonai lachem et haaretz. He gave, Yahweh, to you the land. Yahweh has given you the land. Okay? That is the basic word order. Can this word order be disrupted? Yes, actually. Seow gives 2 pages full of examples of how this might happen. Okay? Don't get freaked out. It may be that in introducing a new subject, the speaker disrupts the word order. Page 150b1, Genesis 4:1. V'ha'adam yada et chava ishto. Now, so that might be translated now. Now Adam, or the man, now the man knew yada et chava, Eve, his wife. You say, well, by chapter 4 in Genesis, it's good that they knew each other. They were the only 2 people on the earth. Yada can also mean sexual knowing, the very special knowing of a man and a woman together. Okay, and he gives a bunch of examples of this. Don't get freaked out by these examples. I want you to read them on pages 150 and 151. And you're going to do tons of examples in the exercise here on page 155, which will give you some practice with this. Okay. We're still getting used to this at this point. Okay. Page 151C is important. I mentioned this already, but I mention it again. The verb normally agrees with the subject in gender, number, and person. So, 1 Kings 146, middle of the page. Yashav Shalomah. He sat. Solomon. Okay. Solomon sat. Yashav is in the third masculine singular. No problem. How about 2 Kings 1:14, middle of the page? Yarida Esh min hashamayim. Esh is feminine, fire, so what do we get? A fire descended. It descended, feminine. A fire from heaven. A fire descended from heaven. Psalm 69:6. Ata yadata. Ata yadata. You know. You know. Okay. Sometimes you can even get a pronoun, kind of redundant there. Genesis 14:24. Ha'anashim asher halaku. Ha'anashim asher halaku. The men which they went. Halak. Okay, the men who went. Do you see how that works? So halaku is in the third common plural, and ha'anashim is plural. There you go. Okay. Page 152. How do you say something will not happen using the perfect? Well, page 152:5, Deuteronomy 28:45. It's easy. You just tack a lo on the beginning. Lo shamata bekol Adonai. Not you did listen to the voice of Yahweh. You did not obey. You did not listen. This thing here, number 6 on page 52, the directive sometimes called the hey directive, or the directive is a way of saying, kind of doing a sort of, I guess in Greek or other languages, this might be called a dative, to the house. How do you say to the house? Well, you can do that with words like be and le, prepositions, meaning to or in. You can also do it by this coming on the end of a word. So you have bayit there, middle of page 152, bayit, house, habayta, toward the house, har, chera, toward a mountain. This often happens with place names, so tirza, ta, toward tirza. It's not in every sentence in Hebrew. This isn't anything to stay up late nights about. Just know that this could come up, okay? Genesis 10:11 at the top of page 153. Genesis 10:11. Min ha'aretz hahi yatsa Ashur. From that land, he went to Assyria. Now here we find out that in fact the we don't always need it to say to something. Exodus 17:10. Alu rosh hagiva'ah. They went up. Allah. Notice the hey went away there for the third common plural for third hey verbs. Allah, alu. They went up to the top of the mountain. Rosh hagiva'ah. Okay. So just expressing that motion. Page 153 gives you some more construct chains. He's continuing our discussion of the construct from several lessons ago. Okay. And he gives you some more examples about how constructs can work. Okay. Read through those carefully. Okay. Page 154, he dumps some more vocab on you. And then you get to translate some longer phrases from the Bible. Hey, if nothing else, just think, while you're doing these exercises, you are actually reading the Bible. You are studying Scripture. This is fun. Okay? Have fun and good luck. Page 154, some good verbs there in the list. Trying to see if there's anything notable there, really. Not really. I mean, under verbs, I might point out mashach. This is where we get our word Mashiach, an anointed one, which is where we get our English word Messiah. Greek Christos, or Christ, the anointed one. Okay, so that's an interesting word. Otherwise, everything's pretty straightforward there in the vocab. Keep making those flashcards, okay?